Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX has just been announced, making it the first PMD news since the release of Super Mystery Dungeon 4 years ago on the 3DS. Many, myself included, thought that Super Mystery Dungeon was the end of the series for good, for several reasons, but yet the Pokémon Company has shown a desire to continue supporting this diamond often in the rough. While on the surface it may seem that the Pokémon Company is simply bringing an old spin-off back through a remake, the impact of this is actually way more important than that. I'll try to refrain from too many spoilers within this video, though what I say may hint towards events in the various games of this series, and I would highly recommend playing these games for yourself first. In this video, I'll be discussing the Mystery Dungeon series as a whole, its place within Pokemon, and why this remake is absolutely vital. Let's start with a bit of backstory behind the Mystery Dungeon series. Back in 2006 was the North America launch of the first of this spin-off series, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team. True to the form of the main series titles, this had two versions, though for the first time in Pokémon history, these two versions launched on separate consoles, with Red Rescue Team being on the Game Boy Advance, and Blue Rescue Team being on the Nintendo DS, as this was towards the end of the life of the Game Boy Advance. This difference in consoles is also reflected in the box art, as on a Nintendo DS, the DS cartridge goes on top, and the Game Boy Advance slot is in the bottom, so if you put the box arts on top of each other in this way, the Pokemon are peering through the same hole. This artistic style is also reflected in the remake's art. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon introduced a new style of gameplay to Pokémon, exploring mystery dungeons where each floor is randomly generated every time you enter it, with your goal being to make it to the staircase to make it to the next floor until you clear the dungeon. You will sometimes have to defeat enemies, or come up with some way to avoid them. Unlike the main series Pokémon games, these were developed by Chunsoft, who took the games in a very different direction than one would expect for Pokémon. Typically main series Pokémon games, heck, even Pokémon games in general, typically won't have a massive emphasis on the plot. Most sum up to collect the gym badges, defeat some evil group, become the champion. There are some exceptions to this, but typically players have come to expect not a massive emphasis on story, something that can be simple and easily enjoyed by all sorts of demographics. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. While the purpose of main series Pokémon is typically the gameplay, with story following suit, Mystery Dungeon feels as if it has the sole purpose of telling a story, with the gameplay following suit. In Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, you've been transformed into a Pokémon, and lost your memory apart from your name and the fact that you were once human. Something Mystery Dungeon is known for is using personality tests to determine which Pokémon you should be, making for a unique experience in terms of which Pokémon you play as. From here, you choose which Pokémon will accompany you on your journey as your partner. After first becoming a Pokémon and waking up, you meet your partner, who seems surprised that you claim to be human. After a cry of help, the two of you rush off to help a Caterpie in need, and from there, with nowhere to go, you rely on your partner for help in this mysterious new world. Because you have nowhere to stay, your partner gives you a house. Don't question it. You have no idea where they sleep. While the game may start the way you'd expect a typical Pokemon game, fairly lighthearted and you go around on explorations, it starts to go places you wouldn't ever expect a Pokemon game to. Once a story begins to truly pick up, those who stand against you are people who are genuinely hunting you to kill you, in a Pokemon game. Not killing you like something you may see in, say, Generation 4 Pokemon with Team Galactic, remaking the universe so everybody's gotta die, or other similar situations with the evil groups in Pokemon games. In Mystery Dungeon, you specifically are being hunted to be killed, even if it's not the word the game ever uses since it's still Pokemon. This new game of Mystery Dungeon made a statement towards the way Pokemon games should be interpreted. It made the argument that just because it has Pokemon in the title, doesn't mean it's not allowed to tackle dark themes, that it has to be a wholesome and fun adventure. This game stated that as a Pokemon game, it was not required to follow these rules that fans had largely accepted by this point, that all Pokemon games would be simple adventures without the courage to tackle dark themes such as sacrifice and death. Unlike the other games with the name of Pokémon in the title, Mystery Dungeon would not be held by these restrictions, making Pokémon Mystery Dungeon games as a whole some of the most incredible cases of subverting expectations for those who haven't yet had the chance to experience a PMD before. It's not only the story where Pokémon Mystery Dungeon is shown, but the music as well. Anyone who's been by my streams for a long time knows I rant a lot when a game does an incredible job at reusing tunes. Taking tunes from other tracks in the OST, it gives the player a sense of familiarity, that this is still the same adventure, but so much has changed. Whether it be somber to set out alone on a seemingly hopeless journey. Trekking through a frozen forest to lose pursuers. Or a final boss theme to bring the entire journey to an end. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon introduced a standard of quality of music and amount of thought put into the soundtrack in this way, which the main series had not quite seen the same level as before. The main series has reused tunes in the past in creative ways, and has gotten even better with reusing tunes in games such as Sword and Shield, but it never felt like the music had so much of a part to play in the story itself with the way it is represented through the reuse of tunes. In Mystery Dungeon, the music is not just something to be fitting in the background, it's a vital part of the story and how it's represented. It tells a story where no character is truly beyond redemption, and makes sure to capture the whole picture, rather than just the story of the protagonist. Anyone who's played a Pokémon Mystery Dungeon before knows that part of the deal is that the story comes with a bittersweet ending, which altogether results in an incredible and very unique story to be told from the perspective of a Pokémon game. With Red and Blue Mystery Dungeon together, this title sold nearly 6 million copies as of December 2014. With such success, a sequel began development. In 2008, North America received the sequel to the hit, in the form of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness, staying true to the format of two different versions with slight differences. Similar to main series Pokémon games, a third version was also later released as Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky in 2009, with more starter Pokémon to choose from, additional post-game content, special episodes, the final of which helps wrap up the story overall, and quality of life changes that make it the definitive edition of PMD2. While PMD1 had a fantastic story, it was nowhere near perfect, with the biggest problem I can point out being a lack of effort in building the bond between the protagonist and the partner, what with suddenly meeting and then all of a sudden, hey, I just met you, take this house! Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers has you washed up on a beach after a thunderstorm, again with no memories save for your name and that you were once a human. The game introduces your partner as a character this time around before you even meet them, showing their cowardice and unconfidence in themselves, wanting to form an exploration team but not having the courage to make it past the front gate. On the beach they meet the player, who then finds themselves helping the partner, rather than a random NPC, to reclaim something important to them, their relic fragment. Unlike PMD1, where the partner just kinda suggests that you should form a rescue team because you worked well together, in the case of PMD2, we've already been introduced to the partner before even directly meeting them, and as is explained, it's been a dream of theirs to be able to form an exploration team. In this case, you're no longer just some random who needed somewhere to go in their eyes. Instead, you're someone who's helped them achieve something they knew they'd never have the courage to do on their own. With your help, they were able to draw out their own inner strength. You become a ray of hope to the partner, to the point that you can tell that they truly want you to be by their side, and the partner to you is your one opportunity to have a place to stay, and someone to stand by you in this unfamiliar world. This whole process fixes the initial meeting problem with PMD1. as the story goes on, the partner begins to have their trust in you deepen, to the point that it feels like you're the one person they can count on no matter what. Even when throwing yourselves into situations that cause death if it doesn't turn out the way you think it will, this naturally timid character is able to draw out their strength and have something to believe in. You. In this game, you have the ability called the Dimensional Screen, which sometimes allows you to see events from the past or the future, or sometimes only hear them. This sometimes gives hints, sometimes gives warnings, akin to visions by Shulk from those who've played Xenoblade Chronicles. It's this dimensional screen that often gives hints about the solutions to seemingly impassable obstacles. It's these situations that serve as a prime example of how the partner is able to find their courage and believe in you. PMD2 builds up the partner in a way that PMD1 was not able to, making them feel truly dependent on you as their one ray of hope in the world. In this world, the flow of time is regulated by objects known as time gears, which nobody tampers with out of fear of completely freezing time in the area. Eventually though, the time gears start being stolen, and time begins to freeze in an ever-growing area. Throughout your journey, you try to reclaim your memories, uncover the mystery behind your past, and even encounter some time gears along the way. While PMD1 largely focused on developing solely the protagonist and the partner, with a bit of another character on the side, PMD2 branches out to focus on developing more characters along the way, having 3 main characters instead of 2, and allowing more time to flesh out the motives of the villains. PMD2 does an absolutely brilliant job of writing a story where no villain is truly evil, simply wanting self-preservation. If your goal results in their deaths, then of course there will be those who stand against you. Eventually, the game presents the characters with a dark future, a paralyzed planet where time is frozen, the result if their mission is to fail. Never before have I seen a Pokemon game to be so dark with its storytelling. This is a world where Pokemon exploit others to survive, or have been driven to pure madness by the post-apocalyptic world, becoming violent or turning against their nature. The game even becomes dark enough to have a scene where the characters are tied up to stockades to be slashed to death, which the game phrases as, "get rid of us," for rating purposes. The story told here is absolutely breathtaking, and never the kind of tale one would expect of a Pokemon game. The music too takes a leap forwards in its ambitions over PMD1, with its reuse of tunes becoming much more prevalent. The music hits everything it needs to, and is able to draw emotions out of the player in such an incredible way. Whether to express complete hopelessness, epic scores to approach the end. Or to express complete sorrow. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers goes absolutely above and beyond through its story and music, resulting in what I truly believe to be a masterpiece. It has heavy themes of sacrifice and the consequences of one's actions, making a truly unforgettable experience, one that someone has to be stone-hearted not to shed tears along the way their first time through. Across the 3 versions, this story sold a total of 6.36 million as of December 2014. But the time of the Nintendo DS had to end, bringing us to the 3DS. At this point, Chunsoft and Spike had formed together to become Spike Chunsoft, and they began working on the next Pokémon Mystery Dungeon game, which came in the form of Gates to Infinity in 2013 in North America. This was the first title in the series to only have one version. At this point with the popularity of the series, it occurred to Spike Chunsoft that maybe they could start introducing gimmicks into PMD games as their selling points, with this game's gimmick being the Gates to Infinity. By pointing the 3DS camera at something circular, it would create a gate, and you could enter that dungeon. This didn't exactly go over as well as they'd hoped, and this game got the most mixed reviews from fans. A large selection of starter Pokemon to be was replaced by a total of 5. 5 Pokemon were your choices to select for both you and your partner. The personality test was gone, with players instead being able to select their Pokemon directly, getting rid of the frustration of trying to get a certain Pokemon, but also eliminating the fun of seeing which Pokemon your personality matched to. The story of this game, unfortunately, did not meet its mark. It wasn't a story which was outright bad, it's a story you can clearly tell they put serious effort into. The story presents some interesting ideas, such as you not being the only human transformed into a Pokemon to help save the world, you being nothing special. It also comes with a plot twist partway through that helps make the story much more engaging and interesting. Unfortunately, the story gets several things wrong, such as being unable to build a serious bond with your partner, as a good part of the game is spent without them. Even the final boss is done on your own rather than together. The story overall to me is unmemorable. I say that because I actually don't clearly remember it, unlike every other Mystery Dungeon game which had a story which became entrenched in my memory as something truly spectacular. Experiencing the story, you can tell they clearly tried, it just unfortunately fell flat for several reasons, and wasn't able to capture the essence of what made PMD1 and PMD2 so great. On the positives of this game, as with every other Pokémon Mystery Dungeon game, it's still at least able to boast an incredible soundtrack, with a brilliant use of reusing tunes from the OST, making some incredibly enjoyable music. However, because of the flaws of this game, the fact it was on a new console, and it released so long after the last title of Explorers of Sky, it wasn't able to be the next big success that PMD1 and PMD2 were, struggling with sales at launch, and selling 1.37 million units as of December 2017. This is still no number to scoff at, but compared to the success of PMD1 and especially PMD2 with its 6.36 million, it didn't shape up well. Gates to Infinity is the worst selling Mystery Dungeon to date, even comparing it to titles such as Red or Blue Rescue Team or Time, Darkness, or Sky on their own rather than together. Thus began the decline for Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. Spike Chunsoft could no longer have the confidence that they once had that a new Pokémon Mystery Dungeon would be able to take off and capture the success that the series once had during the PMD1 and PMD2 era. They had to approach the Pokémon Mystery Dungeon series in a much more careful way. Several years later, in 2016 for North America, we received Pokémon Super Mystery Dungeon. Dropping the mantle of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon followed by the title of the game itself, we had Super thrown into the middle of the series name, which was one of the many reasons this game felt like it was the finale of the series. PMD was on the decline after Gates to Infinity, the 3DS was at the end of its lifetime. Super Mystery Dungeon included every Pokemon that existed up to this point, including familiar faces from every previous PMD game. All of this together made it feel like PSMD was the grand finale, seeing the series off, as it had been a massive success once, but would no longer be able to capture that. To recapture what made PMD2 so iconic, they created a story that actually used the exact same structure as PMD2. If you don't believe me and know both stories, just go through the story of PMD2 and PSMD in your head, and you'll find they both follow the same order of main events, despite having different stories. I can't go into details on the structure though for spoiler reasons. Using the PMD2 story structure for this story turned out brilliantly, I would argue, finally recapturing the essence of what made the story of PMD2 so incredible. This story has the greatest emphasis on the partner out of the entire series. In previous entries, the player was the main character, while the partner was the lead supporting character. In Super Mystery Dungeon, however, I would argue that the partner is the main character, while the player is the lead supporting character, bringing a fresh take into the series and subverting expectations of those familiar with the format of Mystery Dungeon games. There are several situations where you find the partner being the one to take the lead role, to take control of the situation, to be able to face up to any challenge with you there to support them, right until the end. It brings a breath of fresh air into the Mystery Dungeon series, and develops the partner in such a fascinating way, while developing the deepest bond between the partner and the player the series has yet to see. One of the biggest criticisms by reviewers was that the game had a slow start. I, however, feel that the way the game begins and continues for a while is imperative to the plot. Your partner is not even the first Pokemon you meet in this game, far from it. You begin to meet through interacting with each other in Serene Village and at school. They've never truly had somebody to turn to, treated largely as an outcast, and you're able to become a friend to them. Your relationship has its ups and downs, and you have several adventures before the main plot even starts, which most reviewers simply attribute to being a boring, slow start before you can get into the real story. Super Mystery Dungeon develops the most deep and most believable bond between the player and the partner, which is one of the ways it stands out from the rest of the PMD series. Another way it stands out is with its music, having what I would argue is the best soundtrack in the series. While it reuses tunes in a similarly incredible level as PMD2, this game boasts the greatest overall soundtrack. Every dungeon I entered made me want to pull out my guitar and start jamming along. I was surprised by the sheer amount of dungeon themes that were an incredible pleasure to listen to. Even the second half of the very first dungeon of the game was an absolute jammer. Throughout the rest of the game, this adventure holds dungeons full of incredibly fitting and beautiful music. One of the best cases is Foreboding Forest, which perfectly captures the feeling of a haunted forest, while also having an aspect of sadness to it. the final boss theme. The way it reuses tunes from the adventure leading up to this point, and uses it to make an incredibly epic finale, results in one of the greatest final boss themes I've ever heard. The gameplay has become fine-tuned, fixing so many of the problems from previous Mystery Dungeon games. No longer does one have to go into the menu to select what move they want, or only be able to set one move to be able to use on the fly. Holding a button brings up all the moves for the player to be able to use on the spot. Ally AI has been incredibly improved upon, actually acting in ways that are helpful to you, grabbing items when they can, or positioning themselves to attack enemies, unlike previous games where you had to swap places with them a number of times until they were finally in position to attack. Items and gameplay features have been added to make a more enjoyable experience overall, and the difficulty has been ramped up to tackle complaints of the games being too easy. One of the greatest changes, however, was combining the Pokemon selecting process of PMD1 and 2 with Gates to Infinity, giving you a personality test to determine your Pokemon, but you can choose any Pokemon you like if you're not satisfied with who the game assigns you, which, by the way, there is now a much greater selection now than in Gates. Despite everything this game managed to nail, how much it was able to turn the game around after the crash of Gates, it still never did exceptionally well compared to PMD 1 and 2, largely in part to reviewer complaints of aspects like the slow start. This game sold 1.6 million units as of December 2017, which is still pretty alright sales, maybe not for a Pokemon game, and still not coming close to the success of PMD 1 and 2. It was definitely enough to make the project worth it, but it wasn't seeming like even after the turnaround they were able to pull off, that they'd be able to capture that initial audience. Even everyone I know who's played Mystery Dungeon are people who've never touched Gates or Super Mystery Dungeon. Mystery Dungeon went from being a massive success of a series which challenged the conventions of traditional Pokemon titles, to a more niche spin-off which attracted very few new players, being received mostly by those along for the ride since PMD 1 or 2. It just couldn't recapture that same level of praise and attention, and it felt like it may stay that way. It felt like Super Mystery Dungeon could be the finale of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon itself, packed with the most content possible, having throwbacks to the rest of the series, and presented at a time that made sense for the series to end, towards the end of the 3DS. Mystery Dungeon had a title every single generation from Generation 3 to 6, Mystery Dungeon 1 to 4. But Generation 7 came and went, no Mystery Dungeon title to be seen. Maybe Super Mystery Dungeon really was the finale after all. Maybe they'd given up on trying to rekindle the unique and incredible flame that was the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series. The Switch released, and years passed by, with no news so much as mentioning Mystery Dungeon, apart from Chocobo Mystery Dungeon. The thing people like to hate on is the tease of Mystery Dungeon on the Switch. Maybe this was the grave for Mystery Dungeon, and it was never to see the light of day again. January 9th, 2020, the day of writing the script. A 20-minute Pokemon Direct aired in the morning, serving mostly to showcase upcoming DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield, but having one very special announcement right at the beginning. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon on the Switch was no longer a wild fantasy, but it was to be made real. In the past, they've tried introducing new gimmicks hoping the series would continue as it had been, then following in the footsteps of the most iconic game of the series, PMD2, without being able to recapture the sheer volume of audience PMD1 and PMD2 were able to affect. The Switch has been doing very well for itself, and this was a chance to give Mystery Dungeon one more try, by remastering the original Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game. This was a bold move that seemed it wouldn't happen for a few reasons, the biggest reason being the gap in generations. Sure, main series Pokemon can pull off previous generation remakes, while incorporating new features more reflective of the current generations of Pokemon. But a Pokemon spin-off series to be remade for that many generations in the past? This is Generation 3 we're talking about here, when the current Pokemon generation is 8. This move could have gained some traction during the 3DS Generation 3 remakes of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but right now, out of nowhere in the middle of Generation 8, feels rather out of place. Generation 3 hasn't had significance in the spotlight since the brief time it had as the Gen 3 remakes. It's completely out of place with modern Pokemon, which is what made it seem like this is a risk the Pokemon Company wouldn't want to take. This seems to be an attempt to capture old fans of the Mystery Dungeon series, parts of the massive amounts of people PMD1 was able to reach, as the ability for this game to reach a new audience seems like it's more limited than an original title would be due to Generation 3 relevancy. It's possible that many people wouldn't give this title a chance simply because it's so far behind in terms of Pokemon generation since the time of PMD1's initial release. To onlookers from afar, it may just look like a remake of some niche old spin-off at this point. With the history of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, here's why Rescue Team DX is such an important title for Pokemon as a whole. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is a statement that a Pokemon game does not have to follow the traditional, cheery, feel-good path Pokemon adventures are so well known for. Mystery Dungeon allows it to have the freedom to cover darker subjects, walk down paths no other Pokemon game has the courage to try, to develop characters on deep levels you don't typically get in traditional titles, to take you on a musical adventure that has direct connections as part of the story itself, to subvert your expectations and make you question the ethics of your own actions, to question your allegiances and who has the moral right, and to sum it all up with absolutely breaking your heart. No other series of Pokemon games has the courage to attempt the truly bold moves that Mystery Dungeon attempts to make. By releasing this absolutely courageous game for what it has done to what we consider the standard of Pokemon, they are asking if the leap of faith that is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is what people truly want. Do they want to be able to take this step into the unknown, see a side of Pokemon nobody else is willing to tell, to go on a journey with a truly emotional story, or would they rather push these spin-offs to the side and stick with the main series titles they're so used to? By choosing to give this game a try, or leave it be while continuing to play games such as Sword and Shield, you're actively making a statement about what you like to see in Pokemon, whether it be bold leaps like this that challenges the conventions of the series, that it should stick to its roots, or a mix of both. I see this game as a test of sorts. It's no secret that PMD2 was the most successful of the Mystery Dungeon series, which prompts the question of why they chose to remake PMD1 over PMD2. PMD1 and 2 had similar success, ran off the same engine on the same console, had the same lead composer, and all in all, PMD1 and 2 are very much like a set or pair of games. People typically thinking of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon will typically think of these two games, rather than the other two. I never thought I could ever hope for a remake of my favorite game of all time, PMD2. There was no way it could ever be relevant enough to be released unless they could sneakily get it in with main series Gen 4 remakes. They would never release a game of such low relevancy nowadays. And yet, here they are, taking a leap of faith by releasing a Generation 3 Pokemon game remake in 2020, in the middle of Generation 8. This shows that they're willing to take that leap, that this potential lack of relevancy won't hold them back from giving this a shot, something I previously did not think possible. As I mentioned, I see this as a test, and PMD1 and 2 as a set of games. In my eyes, if this game does well, we can expect a remake of PMD2 to follow, completing the remakes of the set of two PMD games that made a massive splash within the Pokemon world. It would only be natural that a PMD2 remake would follow if Rescue Team DX manages to be a success, as it's the other game in the set, the highest selling Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game there ever was, and the most highly acclaimed and praised game in the entire series. This game took the conventions being challenged by PMD1 and pushed it into overdrive, telling a unique story with no truly evil characters, with a breathtaking soundtrack that has moved me to my core. It tells a story of sacrifice, of morality, of what it means to be alive, creating an experience that I at least can attest to making my life genuinely feel better off for having gotten to experience. My only reasoning as to why there was the decision to remake Rescue Team over Explorers is that there's a plan to remaster both of the titles that made Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Even Rescue Team on its own is an absolutely incredible experience, especially to those who've yet to experience a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game and have stuck to main series games or other spin-offs. I reiterate, Mystery Dungeon challenges the conventions of what it means to tell a story through the world of Pokemon. It tells deep and sometimes dark stories one would never expect to see from something with Pokemon stamped on the front. Mystery Dungeon in and of itself is an ambitious leap into uncharted territory for Pokemon, into areas that it has never before covered, and now it's making another ambitious leap with this remastering of the original, despite having no ground to stand on in terms of its relevancy compared to current main series games. So, deciding whether to pick up this game, I must ask you, Do you want to experience an adventure deeper than it seemed like Pokemon could ever go? Do you want to have the music take you on an emotional roller coaster and build a story around you? Do you want to support the idea that this is what Pokemon can be? At the end of it all, do you want to challenge the conventions of what it means to be a Pokemon game? Thank you so much for watching this video. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon is the game series I'm most passionate about, and I just had to express that passion after the sudden reveal that something I treasured so dearly was not gone forever after all, that there is in fact a glimmer of hope for the series. Everything stated in this video is my own opinion. My opinion on various PMD titles may differ from yours, and that's alright. Please let me know what you thought of this video. This is the first time I've made a video on arguments I'm this passionate about. I would love to know how it was received. With that, until next time, hopefully we'll be seeing each other adventuring through the Mystery Dungeons.